It is day 5 of testimony in the Dale Warner murder trial. I'm Melissa Andrews, a crime and investigative reporter covering the trial. Dale Warner is accused of murdering his wife Dee in 2021 and then welding her inside a fertilizer tank where she was found 3 years later. Today, our 14th witness got on the stand. It's our first of the day, Detective Daniel Dreyer from Michigan State Police. He says he became involved in the case in March of 2022. He first assisted the county, but then took over the case in August of that year. So he pretty much is reviewing everything that's so far been investigated by the sheriff's office, but then they start looking into their own investigation, the Michigan State Police. So we looked at a lot of video today of his interrogation of Dale Warner in December of 2022. So this starts out pretty light where they're building a rapport. He asks about his relationship with Dee and what Dee was like. Dale says that they argued once or twice a week. It was a pretty normal marriage. And Dreyer says, well, we have some reports of violence in your household because, you know, they've been interviewing other people. Dale says none at all, screaming, F-bombs, but never any violence. Dreyer says, what can you tell us about this tracking device that you put on the Escalade? Dale says he doesn't know anything about any device. She thought one was in the Hummer, but I had put a diagnostic device in there to see how it's running. She thought it was a tracking device. She was paranoid and didn't want anyone to know where she was going or what she was doing. And I could tell where the Escalade was with OnStar. And then Dreyer says, what about rumors of her having an affair? Dale said, back then I would have said no, but now I'm leaning toward it maybe being true, but I would want proof. She is gone for hours at a time with no account of where she's been. And he said he's found this out in the last 3 to 4 months. There's been a lot of rumors. And then Dreyer says, what about showing up to places unannounced, like when she went out to lunch with someone? And Dale says, that's news to me. He's asked about divorce. He said, no, we didn't talk about that. You can't take that back. Remember, pretty much everybody in Dee's life has said she talked about divorce constantly. Dreyer just asks for a description of the empire, what they've built together. So he talks about all these businesses. Dale says, I'm not going to work 20 hours a day to pay this conservator that had been put in place. The companies are all dead without me. And then they talk about why Dee allegedly wanted to sell the trucking business. And Dale says, I know why. She took so much money out of the trucking business, there's no way it could survive. All the bills were delinquent. She was scamming money out of the accounts. The PPP money was a shot in the arm so they could cover it up for another 5 to 6 months, and I was gonna find it because they were gonna have to come clean. Dreyer says, what year did things go negative in this vegetable farm? And Dale says about 2015. Finances were in turmoil. We lost about $20 million. He goes on to accuse Greg Hardy of basically bailing him out, but really taking 100 acres of his land and saying he's not such a great guy. This deal padded his own pocket. The trucking company was profitable. It looked profitable, he said, because things were being billed to the farming company. And then he references Dee and says, you buy a lake house unbeknownst to your husband, so you give them the financials from the trucking company. Dee tried to sell the trucking company in 2018 without his knowledge. He says, you guys crippled my ability to pay bills when you came in and took everything, referencing the start of the investigation and how it hurt him. He applied for a loan, took out $500,000 SBA loan to pay off debts of Dee's and a $700,000 to $800,000 operating loan. Rob, Dee's affair partner, had a power of attorney, he said, somehow. He said that these detectives are getting led around by the Hardys, and Dreyer jokes he's not going to be getting a Christmas card from Greg Hardy. Dale talks about Dee being on Oxycontin, thinks that she was hooked on him for her migraines. Then he brings up Jamaica and Mexico, says she was really fascinated with Jamaica. She went on this cruise. There were mansions up there. She just loved it. She bought a $10,000 ring there and another $5,000 worth of jewelry. She went on this cruise with Stephanie and a bunch of other people, and apparently they went out and partied and left the kids in the room while they went out and partied with these men from this cruise. Then the detective says, well, how did she get into another country without her passport? Because it's here. And he said, oh, you don't need one. You can give someone $10 to take a boat. And I looked over, and this female juror, who's probably in her 60s, looked over at the kids, and then she did like a little smirk. He said money in the safe was gone, $75,000 to $100,000 cash. Then he says, and a couple of us in the media clocked this, me and Kevin went and looked at what was left, referencing Detective Kevin Greco. We thought it was interesting that he just called him Kevin. He said they've always have $50,000 to $100,000 in cash in the safe. The judge came on and said that all the media has to remove day 1 and 2 footage of the trial because a juror is still being seen on camera. After lunch, it was very hard to hear. If you were watching the stream, that's because the jurors apparently couldn't hear this video, so they moved a speaker closer to them. He says Dee is left countless times, and the kids are all over the place looking for her and looking on the cameras. They weren't looking at the cameras, they were deleting shit off the cameras, he said. The detective asked her about the medicine. You said you're not giving her medicine, but then before you said that you did. He said that they went to sleep on the living room floor, but if you'll remember previously, he said she was asleep on the couch. And he also said they sleep frequently on the living room floor, which the detective thought was odd. Then we go into the Hummer and the location of the Hummer. And they are asking when he accessed these cameras, what were you looking for? And he said, I was locked out of the computer. I didn't access them. And they said, Dale, we promised to be honest with each other. You access the cameras. You have access to them on your phone, correct? I was looking to see who was looking for Dee, see where she was. And they said, what time did Stephanie call you to ask where Dee was? 9:30, things are normal until then. But remember, Raquel said she didn't she didn't go there till about 9, okay? So Stephanie had to come later, about 10:30. And they're saying, why did you access the Cadillac that morning? Why did you go into the garage? He thinks, and they say, you accessed that Cadillac. And he said, there must have been something in there I needed to get out. She's got the key. They're saying, well, we're not saying you drove it. You accessed it for some reason. He said, I hit the OnStar button on my phone. It tells me where it's at. I was going to see where the car was, where she was. So that was maybe problematic. Then we start looking at, again, the location of this Hummer, and Dale had parked this front end loader, and he had marked, let me see if I can show. Okay, so the detective had placed these marks, these X marks around, or Dale did, either one of them. And he said, my intention was just to know one thing, where he parked that front end loader. There were tire tracks observed from the front end loader. He said he went to the house in the front end loader, but that's where the Hummer is typically parked and where it was parked that day. He said Dee must have moved it that day, but how could she have moved it if she was still sleeping? And then there was talk about how he said the first time he knew she was missing was at 10:30, but how did he access these applications well before he knows she's missing? So Dreyer says he got a search warrant for a barn on Paragon Road. This tank was by itself. There was a non-factory weld visible on the tank right here and here, and this handwritten note. So he gets it towed, they put it through an x-ray, they see that body outline, and then the next day they're cutting it open and they're putting a camera down in there, and there was something wrapped inside of a blue tarp. So they continue opening the tank, and then they see this object wrapped in blue tarp, and it ended up being human remains. The medical examiner is up next. First up today is our 15th witness, the second of today, the deputy medical examiner for Oakland County, Dr. Patrick Cho. Dr. Cho is involved in the case because he sometimes contracts with other counties for his services, and in this case, it was Lenawee County, and that's why on August 20th of 2024, he performed the autopsy on Dee Warner. So Dr. Cho here says that it was presumed to be Dee, this body that he had, but it was not confirmed until dental records were sought. He said externally the body was enclosed in a body bag, wrapped in 2 tarps secured with duct tape, unwrapped the 2 tarps, and the legs were bound with duct tape. Her arms were bound to her torso with duct tape over her nose, mouth, and face, and there was also a red debris and sludge. She was dressed in pajama top and bottoms and underwear. She had on earrings and a very large ring. He says when the tape was removed, there were contusions on her right and left cheek, left eye, left shoulder, and a small contusion on the back of the head. Internally, there were blunt force injuries to the top and left skull, hemorrhaging, bruising on the tongue and the back of the throat. He said strangulation and multiple injuries to the face and the head caused her death. Either one independently could have caused her death as well. He was asked, was there any evidence of oxycodone in Ms. Warner's body? He said no. The prosecution says she is fairly well preserved. He says it was a sealed tank with little to no oxygen. Oxygen would speed up decomposition. The date of death is on or around April 25th, 2021. On cross-examination, which lasted just minutes, they asked him, her body condition, independent of investigation, would not give you a date, month, or year of death. He said no. So had he not talked to investigators about this whole case, and they had they not said that she disappeared on April 25th, 2021, he said there's no way I would have been able to tell that. So that's strictly investigatory and not based on the medical findings of the autopsy. She said you can't tell where she died. He said correct. She says there may be two causes of death, strangulation and blunt force trauma, both contributed. He said yes, but one could have independently caused the death. They talked about bodily fluid, brain bleed, rigor mortis. I don't know if that was supposed to score anything. I didn't pick up on anything relevant there. I could be wrong. I think where they scored some big points, though, was with her poking holes in whether or not this was pajamas or not. So all of Dee's friends and family have always said Dee would never go anywhere in pajamas, so she wouldn't have just taken off. She was found in pajamas, but then the defense says, pajamas or sweatsuit. He's saying sweatsuit or pajamas. So they pick up on that and say, you can't tell what type of clothing it is. Look at these pictures. And so he does, and he says, yeah, I can't tell, specifically that it's pajamas. She said, you didn't do the toxicology testing yourself. He said, no, we sent it off. She said, you don't know who the perpetrator was, correct? And he said, correct. There was a juror question, is it possible contusions can be from removing the body after death? And that was no, because contusions form due to reaction when we have an injury. Your heart is beating, causing the blood because you're alive at the time. Another question was, can you tell if the body was killed inside or outside? He said no. I thought that the time it took to question a medical examiner was very quick. And I don't know if that's just me or if you guys picked up on that. The cross-examination was just minutes. I don't know whether to glean anything from that. Does that mean it was more successful for one side or the other, that they only needed to take minutes? Does it mean it's a slam dunk? Does it mean something else for, the defense? It's hard to tell, but it's the quickest examination of a medical examiner I've ever seen. One more thing, something about the dynamic here this afternoon. So the judge issued a protective order over these autopsy photos so media couldn't show them. None of us were going to show them anyway, but for some reason the parties felt the need, which is fine. So the jury's, obviously this is the jury box. They set up these two monitors in front of them instead of where they had been broadcasting over on this side of the wall. So all of Dale Warner's team and Dale Warner go and stand right here on this side of the wall, all along this way, creating basically a wall from the media or the public seeing these exhibits. And then, you know, that just by space alone, this creates such a small area. Dale Warner is standing really on the other side of this wood from the jury, and standing above them. So it was just an interesting few minutes with that as well.